In this lesson, we'll be styling our settings page. To begin, we're going to open up our current settings.uxml, and we're going to add the USS file that you guys can get in the resources section of this lecture. And then we're going to delete all of the elements. And then we are going to drag a new element and we're going to call it header. And then we're going to add the settings header class. Now we're going to drag another visual element and we're going to call it body. And then we are going to give it the settings body class. Now in our header, we're going to create a visual element called tabs. And then I'm going to grab a plain button and we're going to rename that to the graphics tab. I'm going to add the settings tab class to it. And then we are going to change the text to graphics. Now we will change the font size to 30%. And then I'm going to add the class to the tabs visual element. And then we're going to duplicate the tabs. And I'm going to rename the one on the right language. And then the one on the left, we're going to rename to audio. Now we're going to drag another button onto our header. And we're going to call this the close button. And then we're going to add the corresponding class. Then I'm going to drag a visual element and we're going to call it the close button icon. And then I'm going to add the close button icon class. Then we're going to drag another visual element onto the body and we're going to call it content. And we're going to add the settings content class. Then I'm going to drag another visual element and we're going to call it footer. We're going to add the appropriate class. Then within our footer, we're going to have two buttons. The first one is going to be the save button. And we will call it save. And we will change the font size to 30%. And then I'm going to duplicate it and rename it to reset button. And change the text to reset. Next, we're going to open our visual settings UXML and we're going to add the settings.uss file to it. And then I'm going to delete the panel. And we're going to start over by dragging a visual element. And we're going to call this the resolution setting. And we're going to add the setting class to it. Then we're going to drag a label and we're going to call it the resolution setting label. And we are going to add the settings label class to it. And we'll have to change the size to 25%. And I know it's a little difficult to see now, but once we put it on the settings background, it will change. So we'll change the text to resolution, and then we are going to add another visual element called resolution setting option. And we're going to add the appropriate class. And then we're going to make a label a child of the element we just created, and we're going to call it resolution setting value. We'll add the corresponding class, and then make sure we change the size to 25%. Now we're going to drag two plain buttons, and the first one is going to be called the resolution previous button, and we will add the setting previous button class. Then we're going to rename our other button to the resolution next button and add the appropriate class. Now we're going to duplicate our resolution setting, and I'm going to change it to full screen. And again, we'll repeat the process for the other visual elements. Change the text to full screen. In the visual setting element class, we're going to rename our variables to match the new names. And so the full screen comes before the next and previous prefixes. Same thing for resolution. Now we can go ahead and drag our visual element onto our settings element. Now we will open up our audio settings UXML, and again we're going to import our USS file, and then we're going to delete the content that's already there. And we're going to start off by adding a visual element, and this one is going to be called the master volume setting. We'll be sure to add the appropriate class, and then we're going to add a slider. And we're going to give it the settings slider class. And we're going to rename it to the master volume slider. Now I'm going to duplicate it and call the second one the music volume setting and music volume slider. We're going to duplicate it again, and then we're going to call the last one the sound effects volume setting and sound effects volume slider. Then we're going to change the value to 1, the label to sound effects volume, and we are going to change the text size to 100%. And we're going to repeat the process for our music volume, setting the high value to 1 and the value to 1, and changing the text size to 100%. And I'm realizing that the low value should not be 0 because we're doing a logarithm function, and so we'll set it to some really low value like 0.001. Now we'll go back and change the text size to 100%. Now in our settings element, we can go ahead and drag our audio settings element onto the canvas. And we are going to disable or change the display to false for both of them by default.